listen, I'm very appreciative that you're joining us for a conversation, an update on our efforts to really make improvements around foster youth housing, specifically on college campuses, college campus communities is where our focus on. I'm Dr. Reggie Blaylock, senior fellow. Senior fellow kind of means old. I learned that when my title went to senior fellow. I thought it was senior in experience, and now senior in age. That's some gray hair right there, y'all. Okay, but I'm retired, so it's turning back to black. I'm just letting you know now. That's what happens when you retire. That's why I could be twins with Jeree. So, listen, I spent the last 35 years working in higher ed, and I focused all of my work around the leadership roles that I've had, vice president, dean, associate vice president, all those roles on students that need help, that need support, underserved communities, under-resourced students, really doing the work around how do we build partnerships and make things work and make things much, much better. Not only at my campus, but in my campus, in my state, and how we do some of this nationally as well. So I'm honored to serve in this role as the senior fellow for Campus Compact. I'm deeply honored to support the HUD plus higher ed engagement network, specifically focused on foster youth, the Foster Youth Initiative, okay? Today, we want to engage you in a conversation. Not going to be a lecture. Ain't going to be folks just talking to you. It's going to be a conversation around this work. And so we're going to take everybody, we're not muting you. You'll mute yourself. Come off mute as you need to ask questions, share some comments, some experience. We're all going to be timely. I'm going to try to keep us moving along in terms of our timeliness, but we really want to take everybody off of mute so that we can have a conversation. Now, if your music start playing or your dog start barking, I'm coming for you, okay? You better mute yourself so we can all hear the conversation, okay? But that's our purpose. That's our intention. So use the technology to maximize our ability to connect, because we know this work is all about being connected. None of us can do it alone. You can't do meaningful work in this arena by yourself. I don't mean individually by yourself. I mean also as an individual organization or company, institution. You can't do it all the way that we're trying to do it by yourself. So we got to do it together. So we'll do our best to get to all the questions. We might have about 40 people on this morning. Some people are jumping in, jumping out. So we're going to do our best to get to questions. Take yourself off mute, raise your hand, put it in the chat. Whatever way you're comfortable throwing in information, please feel free and comfortable that you're talking with friends and colleagues here. We're not just some folks that are spread across the country. This is about friend work, heart work. We got to be connected, and I need you to be comfortable in this space that we're trying to create today. We got about a 10-minute break in about an hour. We're going to take about a 10-minute break just to step off of Zoom, because 2 hours of just blinking on the screen ain't going to work. So for some folks, it's lunchtime. So if you see me stuffing my face, it ain't my lunchtime. But if you see me stuffing my face anyway, just give me some grace, okay? If you got to drink your coffee, grace. I got some water right here. I may need to refresh myself. Give me some grace, okay? So that's how we work, right? That's how we work as friends and colleagues, right? And 2 hours from now, it's going to be friends, colleagues, and family, okay? So that's how we work. Give each other a little grace and give yourself some grace. One of our colleagues on the call this morning called me an hour ago. She was on the side of the road because her tire was flat. She limped along to a tire place to get it repaired, jumped in a lift, went home, and is on this Zoom right now. And she got to go back and get her car later today, but she didn't want to miss. And so I'm saying to you, as I said to her this morning, grace, give yourself some grace. You're going to be okay. That car's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay. If you're 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late, it's okay. But she was on time. all right, on the side of the road this morning. So let's all be okay. If you need to refresh yourself, have a little snack along the way, it's okay. We're going to be just fine. And so we know, again, that we can't do this work alone. So I got to do 2 introductions before I jump in. I'm going to do the first segment, about 20 minutes. I want to talk about some tuition waivers around the country. I'm going to jump right in first. But before I do that, I want to introduce 2 of my colleagues that are on this morning, because again, I can't do this by myself. None of us can do this work. So the first person I want to introduce you to, I call him JD. His name is Jasper Davis. He is the lead technical strategist and senior manager of technology for Campus Compact. He's the one that connects us all, making us all happen behind the scenes, right? You got to have somebody that tech support. And he is the senior manager. And he's not old like me, even though he got senior in his title. Can you believe that? Where's Jasper? Wave to us, Jasper, so we can all see him. See him right there? 6 months from now, he's going to be my twin. Okay? He's going to be my other twin 6 months from now, because I'm going back. I'm telling you, I'm getting younger and cuter. I'm telling you, 6 months from now, you're going to recognize between me, Jasper, and Jaree. Y'all ain't going to know the difference of which one is which. Thanks, Jasper. I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you, Jasper. All you doing behind the scenes to make the magic happen. Thank you. And then the other person I want to introduce to you guys, I just rarely ever get a chance to do this. So I got to take a pause for the cause to introduce you guys to Bobby Lauer. Bobby Lauer is the president of Campus Compact. She didn't know I was doing this, but I don't care. I'm doing it because I got her and I see her. And wave to us, Bobby, so they know who you are. There's Bobby. Listen, Campus Compact is the nation's largest organization dedicated to higher education and civic community engagement, with over 1,000 colleges and universities as members. The mission is to advance the public purpose of colleges and universities by deepening their ability to improve community life and educate students in civic and social responsibility. Let me say this again, because I don't want to miss this. Deepening their ability to improve community life and educate students for civic and social responsibility. That's big. And that's what the mission is for the organization. Sometimes people don't hear that. They don't see it. It's not discussed, but that's how these efforts fit within the organization, within the mission of the organization, to make a difference. Again, the largest public organization in the country with over 1,000 colleges and universities. So let's go. Let's go, Bobby. I see you, Bobby. We see you, and we appreciate you for your leadership. And sometimes I use the word leadership because it's not just leading, but it's also leading and shaping our future and shaping our present. So we appreciate Bobby's leadership, and we appreciate her leadership. And so I want to preface, I'm pivoting to this piece that I want to jump in and talk a little bit about. And I want to preface this conversation, folks, by saying that none of what you hear this morning and this afternoon is a criticism of the people, places, or things that we do. This is not a critique, and it's not to speak ill or bad about anybody or anybody's, the bodies of work that folks are doing. And I say that because sometimes people can hear some things in a way that it may not be intended, the way that it was received. I don't care how talented, how cute I may be. Reggie ain't gonna never be perfect. Dr. B ain't gonna never be perfect. My communication is never going to be perfect. And I've yet to meet anybody whose communication is perfect. Although I will say Felicia, who was my wife of 30 years, she's pretty close. I've learned that over 30 years. Listen to her, okay? So let me just say again that I want to be as clear as I can. We cannot get better, expand, improve the work that we want to do without examining some of the work that we do. I have an old saying, I've been saying this for a long time, and I certainly didn't invent it. But if you do what you did, you'll get what you got. If you want something different, you got to do something different. So we can't just keep doing what we've been doing when foster youth are graduating from college across the country between 3 and 4%. 3 and 4%. In California, we've been hovering at 3% for over 12 years. 3%. We can't be satisfied with that. That can't be okay, because we know, right, based on all of the data, that 84% of foster youth tell us they want to go to college. 84% tell us they want to, but only about 10% will actually get there. Of the 84%, 10% will get there, and we're graduating them at 3%. So we can't be okay with let's just keep doing what we've been doing. We got to be okay with engaging in a conversation around how we can do some things a little bit different to get better at this. And so the housing component, which is where our focus is, the housing piece is a critical component, because the kids will tell you, as I would tell you, that you can't talk to me about my midterms, about my grades, about my quiz, about my tests, if I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. If I don't know where I'm going to be sleeping this week, and I'm not sure where my next meal is coming from, how can I be the best student possible? How can I be amazing? How can I step into my amazing space as a scholar, right? We want all of our kids that come to our higher ed institutions to come as scholars, right? How can you come as a scholar if I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight? If I don't know where I'm eating tonight? So we got to talk about this conversation around housing. And all of our HUD colleagues will tell you, they will tell you to a person that the biggest challenge is not the housing resource. It's not necessarily the stipend, the housing voucher itself. It's finding people who will rent from a foster youth. Finding landlords that will say, yes, we have space for you. Even though you might be 18 or 19 or 20, you have no credit, no co-signers, etc. They are the last people oftentimes that landlords will rent to. So the challenge that our talented staff often have across the country, affordable places and willing to rent to, access to housing, access to affordable housing. And so we're in this conversation around colleges and universities that have housing, that have space for foster youth. That's where we are. So Jasper, I'm gonna have you put up this map. So where I want to begin to talk a little bit about how this fits is when you look across the country, right? There is this map that I'm referring to. It's not my map. This is a map that I pulled up. Post-secondary, right? Colleges and universities, financial support for former foster youth. And we know that the resources are limited. And this map, the reason I'm referring to it is because what's not seen, like there's some behind the scenes stuff that most of you know about. There's some age limits on access to tuition waivers. This map speaks specifically, not to housing, specifically to tuition waivers. But there's age limits. There's the amount of time that students were in the foster care system that has some limitations around access. There's the amount of funding and the number of awards, the actual number of awards. There's some maximums, there's caps in many of the states that actually offer tuition waivers. And then what does a tuition waiver, what does it actually cover? And then there's some personal financial requirements. So let me give you a couple examples. And I'm giving these examples, let me preface again, not as a criticism. I just simply want to point out that behind the scenes, behind this map, there may be some limitations that sometimes folks aren't aware of. And I'm trying to bring some awareness to the conversation. So in Alaska, for example, and let me say this, I was hesitant whether or not I should name states, because, and I'll tell you why I was a little hesitant, but I'm going to do it because we just got to do what we got to do. So Alaska, for example, is tuition only, and it's capped at 20 scholarships per year for the state, 20 per year. In Connecticut, there's 2 different programs in the state of Connecticut. And I'm just jumping around naming some states. I'm not going to go through all 50 states. But in Connecticut, there's 2 programs. One of the programs, the kids have to put in $500 as a personal contribution themselves. So you got to put up $500 to be eligible. And we know that's a challenge for many students. The other program in Connecticut, and I'm reading this as a quote, so this is not Dr. B making up this language. This is the language, and I'm quoting. Student must exhibit adequate social skills and demonstrate appropriate behavior as assessed by the social worker. Read it one more time. Student must exhibit adequate social skills and demonstrate appropriate behavior as assessed by the social worker to be considered for a tuition waiver. I ain't never heard nothing like that in my life, but that's what's required. In Maine, it's tuition only, and it had been capped at 30 students per year. And most recently, through work of many of the staff and professional folks, that cap has gone from 30 students a year to 70 students a year. And so let me just say this, and I don't know if my friend is on the Zoom or not, but we had a conversation a few weeks ago. We were having this conversation, and the way that my colleague heard me make that announcement at 30 per year, and they had gone to 70 per year, he felt like it was a negative. And he said, you know, rather than it coming across as negative, can you spin it another way that is positive? Because we worked for a couple of years to get it increased to 70 a year. And my feedback was, first of all, it's not designed to be negative. It's designed to simply state this is what the facts are. But more importantly, I want to make sure you don't miss the big picture. The big picture in the conversation is really twofold. One, we're trying to eliminate caps altogether. So 70, which is, I give you applause for 70, but there shouldn't be any limit, period. In a state the size of yours, that 70, we know in a given year, you're still going to have students who aren't going to have the opportunity to go to school. And secondly, that tuition only covers tuition. It doesn't cover any housing. It doesn't cover books. It doesn't cover meals. It doesn't cover any personal expenses. So we know that going from 30 to 70 is significant, but it ain't the solution. So I'm just sharing that conversation because, again, context. And my friend and colleague was in a different space in terms of his applause. And I'm applauding the effort, but I am making the point that that's not the solution. That may be along the way, but it ain't the solution. And then also I wanted to mention New Hampshire as an example. New Hampshire is capped at 10 university tuition waivers and 10 community college waivers for their system. 10 for university, 10 for the community college a year. Virginia had been capped at 10 community college waivers, tuition waivers only, 10. And just recently, again, through the work of the staff, they've added 10 for universities. So now they have 10 for community college waivers, 10 for universities for the entire state of Virginia. 10, and 10. Tuition waivers, no housing, no books, no other resources. Minnesota, their language, they call it a decentralized model. And in their model, students apply directly to the campus and really directly to the president at each campus in Minnesota. And the president has the sole discretion to allow tuition waivers. So there's no number. So from one year to the next, you don't know what it's going to be. And so when I talk with the staff, they've said, Reggie, the good news is over the last few years, none of our students that applied have been denied. And that's really good news. But I explained this to them in the conversation. We're celebrating that no one has been denied, but here's the reality for many students that are homeless, wards of the court, unaccompanied minor, foster youth. There are many kids who will decide, based on your criteria, I'm not going to apply because the president is going to decide if I'm going to get the scholarship or not, and I'm not worthy. I'm probably not going to be accepted, so why bother? Many of these kids that we are working with don't have the cultural capital, right? They don't have the academic capital, the university experience to feel confident enough to apply to a system that says it's at the sole discretion of the president. That person will make the decision. So students who are sophomores or juniors in high school or seniors in high school or freshmen in community college are looking at that process, and many of them will just simply weed themselves out because they don't have that cultural capital. They not have that encouragement and that support, etc. So I'm just sharing with you a little bit about where some of the challenges are with the tuition waiver, with this particular map around tuition specifically. And again, we're not even talking about the housing piece, which we know is a critical component for many students who will decide to apply or not apply, or even if they apply and get accepted, they don't see the housing piece. Where am I going to live and how am I going to be supported? So I just wanted to share that again as background as we begin this conversation this morning. And then let me take a pause. And Jasper, I'm happy to take that down. Let me see if we got any questions, thoughts, ideas. So let me take a pause for the cause. What do you think? Is this something you guys are familiar with? Is this something that you're not familiar with? Again, this is simply an intro to the conversation. I just want to provide a little context, please.
Yeah, Tim had some comments in the chat. I think Jasper's going to read it, right?
Julie, I think Julie's going to grab it.
Okay.
Happy to read it. Tim, thank you for your comment. It reads, that's not an accurate description of Minnesota. I'm helping students at its finals week, so I can't be on camera. I can follow up later.
Okay. So that, well, that's great. We'll take whatever feedback we can get. Again, I'm just reading what the criteria says, and I'm quoting specifically what it says. So, and sharing in the conversation. So we'll take all the feedback we can get. I'm happy to get more and more and more. Any other thoughts, suggestions, ideas, please?
We have a question from Marin. Are these post-secondary financial supports for youth all from Chaffee funds or some other source, federal or state funding?
All state, 100% state. Yeah, good question. All state. That map is state-based.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
JR would like to speak regarding Florida.
Yeah, please. Jump in, JR, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say for the HUD person, I'm not sure where they're from, but in Florida, we have something that goes beyond just the fee exemption. There's also a PES program, post-secondary education support and services, and that's a $1,756 educational stipend monthly for a young person that meets eligibility that's going to school. And that's a combination of ETV funding and then general state revenue. And they can receive that up to the age of 23 in Florida. So there is some additional funding outside of Pell and the fee exemption.
Nice. And
Thank you.
yeah, John, let me ask, is that, and there are no caps, if I remember, in Florida. There's not like a limit of 20 or 30 or 40.
No, there's no limit on that. And you know, some of the states like Colorado, when I said theirs is a little bit more complex, that there actually is some financial exchange between the states and the universities. But in Florida, it's waived. But the fees are a whole nother issue, because that's not a comprehensive list. So if they go to a university, universities will say, well, these are university fees. You're not used to that. You've been going
Right.
to state college. So like it's a different experience. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to navigate.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Then we had another comment. Did I see one pop up?
Yeah, another source for how state networks are working on the broader issue of former foster youth and secondary education is FAN. I think it's a network. And this is from David Myers, from the University of Georgia. So, David, I don't know if you
I can come off mute if I just,
Yes,
you know, as Dr. Blaylock is sharing that map, the map that we've been working on this similar kind of issue in Georgia, not specifically related to housing, but more broadly. And that map has evolved and changes so quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, the as you look at the different layers that you're talking about, both federal ETV, Chafee funds, state funds, tuition waivers. You know, Georgia, for instance, has a tuition waiver only for technical colleges. We just recently had a donation to our university system that is going to take the form of scholarships, but there's not a process. So my point is, it's evolving super quickly, and the state networks are working to try and help coordinate those efforts. But I would hope and encourage that as this work evolves, that some of those statewide network folks could be engaged.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for that, Dave. Appreciate you sharing that. And you know, as the information is produced, it becomes, you know, almost out, you know, in some areas, some states, outdated, you know, 6 months later. But again, we're sharing this. I always keep reminding everybody, this is not a criticism. It is, we're trying to put the information out there so we can figure out how to connect, how to communicate, what are the needs. And, you know, again, this map that I'm referring to is about tuition waivers, but we know that the housing piece, which most often these tuition pieces that we're talking about, does not include housing. And housing is a barrier, a serious barrier for students deciding to go, right? I don't care if they get admitted. As we said, many of the kids are going to get admitted. I was talking to some folks in Texas a few weeks ago, and just using some numbers that they gave us for a particular campus, large campus in Texas. They had identified through the financial aid application, almost 3,000 students had applied to the campus, but only about 1,100 former foster youth, 3,000, only about 1,100 actually followed up with the application. And they were trying to figure out why 2/3 of their applicants didn't follow through, former foster youth. And in housing, number one issue is housing. It wasn't the tuition so much, it wasn't some of the other resources, opportunities that they had access to, but the housing piece, they could not come up with a model, a resource to support the housing specifically. I want to be sensitive to our time because they're not going to accuse me of running overtime. And so I'm over time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not over time yet. I'm not there yet. I'm looking at the time. I'm doing pretty good right now. So, and let me add this. At the end of the conversation, we do have some time allocated for Q&A. So if you don't get your questions in now, or something is marinating, you want to circle back to, we will have time at the end. We got about 20 minutes at the end of the morning allocated specifically for Q&A for any which way that we want to go. So don't feel like if you don't get it in now, you won't have an opportunity to circle back to the conversation. We're going to pivot, and we're going to get some jury time in. I'm pretty excited that you get a chance to hear from my twin and take some questions from him. Jury Turlington is a housing professional with over 15 years of experience across local, state, and federal experiences around affordable housing, federal affordable housing specifically, and their providers. He is, his title, I love it, right? He's a senior housing innovation specialist. Again, he's a senior, so he's not old though, but he's got senior in his title. And so Jury aids public housing authorities. And you guys, there's over 3,000 public housing authorities across the country. And so, you know, Jury doesn't work with all 3,000, but this is what he does. He works with them to navigate the complexities of the regulations towards development of local driven solutions. And I can tell you, I lean on him quite a bit. I reach out to him, ask him about policies, practices, procedures, acronyms. Oh, they live in acronyms. They got a lot of acronyms. What does this mean? What are some of the intentions behind some of this? And so he's been a great resource for me, a great resource for the initiative, and we always appreciate some jury time. So let's give him some love, snap him up, clap him up, whatever you need to do. Give Jury some love because we got him from DC, y'all. Give him some love. Welcome, Jury, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Reggie. I second what Bobby said in the comments. Like, you're an excellent hype man. I need you for all my presentations. And good morning to everyone, and good afternoon to some that are on the East Coast like myself. Again, my name is Jury Turlington. I am with the Moving to Work office at HUD. So I'm here today to kind of share some about the program here. Specifically, it's related to the public housing authorities. There are a few across the nation that had this designation that might better serve this purpose of housing foster youth. So I have a small presentation that I'll kind of walk through. Happy to take any questions after, but let me know if you can see my screen. Try to share here. Right.
Got it, Jury. Perfect.
You got it. Okay, great. So what is MTW, right? Or excuse me, Reggie did say we live in a world of acronyms. The program is called Moving to Work, and we refer to it as MTW. So I'll use that term throughout this presentation. And let me just say that the program isn't based around moving to work. We're here to find housing solutions and kind of give more autonomy back to the public housing authorities and addressing the issues of their individual areas. Specifically, we want to make sure that we are taking away things that we can apply to other agencies nationally. And so through this presentation, I have a slide that kind of shows some of those things that some of the agencies have done. But I like to refer to Moving to Work, or MTW, as like HUD's testing lab for housing innovations that we can kind of share throughout the nation and kind of progress toward I don't want to say the D word, but more autonomy to the agencies to consider the things that are prevalent in their area instead of being so prescriptive with things through the regulations. Going to the next one. So what's different about MTW? First, traditional agencies have to follow the guidelines, the regs to the T. We offer some waiver flexibility of those things so that they can implement activities or initiatives that are better suited to their area. So if agencies are seeing a lot of homelessness or they need to address their public housing stock condition a little bit more, they're given some of that latitude to do. So the program has a bucket list of waivers that we offer that cover things like rent reform, things like unit inspection, really things that are beneficial to agencies to achieve some administrative efficiencies. Also kind of house more families and push more folks to self-sufficiency. So the key components of NTW, again, are those list of waivers of the regulatory things. But the main thing is the funding flexibility. So traditional agencies get their pot of funds from HUD specifically for those intended purposes. So if I were to give an example of it, you get, let's say I'm a parent and I have a budget allotted for a top, a bottom, and a pair of shoes, if we look at it as a wardrobe. And every year, you know, top money has to be spent on buying new shirts. The pants money has to be spent on buying new pants, shoe money on shoes. Our agencies have some flexibility around that to where if their shoes are good and they need to buy an extra top, say you want a short sleeve and a long sleeve, they can do that. Or if you want to use some of your shirt money to buying shirts and pants, you can kind of do that. It's more so giving them some flexibilities, some autonomy to decide like where's our money best spent, instead of saying, hey, we received these monies from HUD, but we have to use them from that. So we are trying to create some efficiencies and allow them to address some of the things that are more prevalent in that area. So in this case, some of these agencies are allowed to, I guess you could say, siphon funds or set funds aside for additional activities that they want to pursue, but might not otherwise be able to because they're earmarked for certain things. So when we talk about housing foster youth, this is something that they can kind of carve out a set amount of dollars as like a niche program that they're pursuing because that's something that they highly value in that community. So here is a list of flexibilities. Like I said, it's a bucket list of waivers that cover about 17 different categories. But one of the tenets of the program is to achieve these three things here. There are three objectives. So cost of savings, we want to see them achieve some savings, whether it be through administrative streamlining or efficient use of funds. Then the second objective is self-sufficiency, pushing people toward better things. So we see them implementing things like rental assistance or supportive services, which could also be beneficial to these youths here. And then housing choice. Of course, you know, housing families is the number one mission of HUD, and we understand the crisis that's going on and the hardships in finding landlords. So there are a lot of the flexibilities do allow the agencies to pursue different avenues and kind of encourage their landlords, their residents to kind of meet in the middle otherwise. So as I said, there have been a lot of impacts from the program thus far. Here's a list of those. And most recently, you've probably seen the COVID-19 emergency waivers, where we allowed some of those flexibilities that we had tested through a program to be spread nationally. And I'll say I expect this list to grow because currently the program was at 39 agencies and we expanded over 100 agencies. And these are just takeaways that we learned from the original 39 agencies. So now having some more agencies on board, we expect to see a lot more great things from our agencies that we can kind of push out to all agencies, whether they have this designation or not. And here's kind of a slide to just give you guys a visual of where our agencies are. Correct me, I might be wrong. So I think we are in 38 states in the District of Columbia. And here's kind of where I talked about we had initial agencies and then we expanded. So we try to hit more states, and obviously we don't have full coverage of all the agencies that are in the nation. But this will give you a visual if some of these PHAs might be in your area and, you know, areas where you can kind of reach out and create those partnerships. So again, I'm trying to keep it really high level. It's a nuanced program that we just hope to kind of, or I guess the purpose of this is more so to foster that relationship, to get that started if you see like there's an agency that happens to be in your area. I'm happy to answer more questions. Like I said, really try to keep this brief. But here's our website if you need to. I can always field questions. And I see some coming in the chat, so I don't know if Jasper, you want to host them?
Julia, this is Julie. I'll be more than happy to read the question. Beverly asks, how do states or local PHAs become involved in the MT?
So, um, if you don't have an agency that's not an MTW agency, unfortunately, they can't just come to HUD and say, "Hey, we want to be one." Um, of course, as we've been a program since 1996. There were 39 original agencies onboarded then, and in 2016, we expanded to 100 agencies under a congressional mandate. So those were selected through 5 different cohorts. Uh, Basically applications that we put out there for folks to apply, random selections, and win that way. So unfortunately, we can't just flip the switch and say, "Hey, you're MTW because you're interested." So we're kind of limited to these 138 agencies at this moment.
Um, JR has a question. Do you
Yeah,
have,
Julie, I'm sorry to cut you off. Let me ask, was that question related to a public housing authority, or was it related to a university or a foundation asking how to partner?
it was from the, Beverly's from, you mean, which
Yeah,
organization Beverly's from?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Arizona, Department of Child Services,
Okay.
Beverly, perhaps I'm misspeaking here. I'm just looking.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Arizona Department of Child Safety. And I was just curious if there's like a NOFA process that in the
Gotcha.
future, if a PHA was interested
Okay.
or another entity, how does that work?
Okay. And let me say, the reason I asked the question is because in about 40 minutes, a little bit later in our presentation, we're going to present another map. Jeree did the national map. We're going to break that down a little more closely so that you can see the Public Housing Authority, the PHA, and the moving to work agencies that Jeree is describing, all 139, 138 of them, and colleges or universities that are within, let's say, 30 miles of that of that group, so that campuses and other agencies can look and see, and we got emails and contacts. You can look and see sort of who's in your neighborhood and how to begin a partnership for resources at your institution. So we're going to get into that next step, but we wanted Jeree to introduce it to us. So Jeree is giving us the big picture. We're going to take what Jeree said, we're going to complement his conversation with the next steps a little bit later in the presentation. That's the reason why I asked the question, so thanks.
JR has a question. Do you have examples of how MTW has been used flexibly in regards to FYI, trying to wrap my mind around, some topics that Dr. Blaylock presented a few weeks ago, since this is a follow-up.
Sure. So Marin's going to do a presentation later on how FYI vouchers work, but typically there's a NOFA that has to be applied. An agency has to apply for to kind of win some foster youth initiative vouchers specifically. Our agencies have that funding flexibility to where if they don't win and they still want to pursue that, they can kind of use some of those funds that might have been earmarked toward, let's say, their public housing for foster youth housing specifically. So they, instead of spending those funds on what they're earmarked for traditional agencies, they're given some latitude to kind of use them toward purposes that are relevant, or for this purpose, foster youth initiative vouchers, if they didn't win a NOFA or in tandem with that NOFA. And I think Reggie can kind of give an example of San Diego Housing Commission, which he and they created a partnership and framing some of those flexibilities and some of that funding uses there. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak to that now, Reggie, but
yeah, I do. I'll jump in. Let me add this. Brian Spencer, Spence just jumped on. He's been on for a little bit, but Brian's from San Diego State. And amongst other things, Brian oversees the Guardian Scholars Program at the university. That program was launched in 2007, but the partnership with the San Diego Housing Commission, which is a public housing authority, but the name they use is San Diego Housing Commission, we launched a partnership with them in 2016. We did some work in 2015 to create the language, the agreements, relational work. But Brian can talk a little bit about that particular program and how that partnership that's been in place now for almost 10 years and how those kids are graduating about 83%. In California, 3%. At the university, they're hovering around 83%. Spence, would you jump in, please, my man? Some smart guy hired this guy years and years ago. That'll be me, by the way.
Do I got a real 2 minutes or like a Reggie Blaylock 2 minutes?
You gotta make me 2 minutes.
All right. Well, good morning. I guess impromptu speak on this. I guess some information about us. Yeah, we've been working with this program now in collaboration with their San Diego Housing Commission since 2016. Initially, we had 63 students participating in this. Now we have 100 students capped out at 100 students being supported both on campus and off campus. So their on campus room and board are completely covered. And then off campus, typically prior, they were eligible for up to $652 a month. However, if many of your places might be like San Diego, cost of rent is excruciating for students and most people living off campus. So they've actually, through, I guess, probably more so our efforts of success, our Housing Commission was willing to revise the payment schedule for our off-campus students, actually. So we have some students receiving almost twice, 3 times as much money as they did prior based on this new payment schedule. So it's really supportive for those students, both on and off campus. This was when instituted, our students were taking about $252,000 in collective loans activated in a year prior to this. And that was pretty much with about 95 students. After this, the following year, it dwindled down to $2,500 collectively amongst the group. So it is a game changer, both for their physical, mental health needs, as well as just safe and security. But financially, it's also something that prevents students from having to leave college with any kind of loan debt. So that's one really huge benefit that's come from this as well. But we continuously work with the Housing Commission every year. We provide reports. We demonstrate how these services, not only the housing services and how we have implemented ways to ensure that we get our numbers, but also giving highlights of our general program, graduation rates, continuation rates, as well as what we're doing with our program and expanding. So we are also in the process of expanding to 200 students now. And hopefully that'll be something that also influences maybe the increase in funding to support more students for on and off campus.
Yeah. Questions for Spence? Questions for Brian? Again, if we don't have them now, we'll circle back. We'll certainly have more time for more questions later on. But again, that partnership has been in place for almost 10 years. So we got 10 years of data, demonstrated data around continuation rates, graduation rates. As Brian just mentioned, over 100 students collectively, their loan amount is about $2,000 for all of them together, which averages about $90 a student in loan per year. Please, Jared, want to jump in?
Yeah, Jerry, I got a few more questions, like clarifying questions for you. With the move to work, I just been really trying to wrap my head around this. Can funding through that also provide flexibility? Like, oh, we want to have certain number of our staff Youth Thrive certified, or youth engagement training, because we really want them to be the ones that work with those young people. Can they use it for things like that too, to make sure they have better prepared staff for this population? They go through like trauma-informed training and things, or is it?
Yeah, so I mean, I try to keep it high level, but there are what we call local non-traditional activities that these agencies can pursue. And under that, it's a lot of the supportive services that this would kind of fall under. So if they wanted to allot some of the funds, for the vouchers and then supportive services for these youth, like that is something that the agency can do if they feel like they have the the bandwidth within their budget to do so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to ask. I have 1,000 questions, but I'm not going to ask them here because I don't want to take up too much space. But, one thing that comes up in a lot of conversations around these vouchers and housing authorities is forcing these young people, young adults, through a very adult system. And how can we do a better job of making the experience different for them if we can? And have you heard of any groups that have done something creative, maybe through this work to kind of re-envision the way they serve young people versus, you know, young adult versus someone that's 35, right? And coming for a Section 8 voucher?
I haven't, and I don't have a specific example, unfortunately. However, like a lot of our agencies pursue what we call housing navigators, which in tandem with caseworkers kind of create, relationships and make sure those youth can transition a little bit better. So maybe that's an option, and as far as like, using some of their funding toward supporting the payment of those individuals, specific for that purpose. But I don't have a specific example for it, but that's something they could do. Yeah.
Figured I would ask since you were here, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions for Jeree? And because we're going to go to a break for about 10 minutes right about now, but I want to make sure before we break, any last thoughts for Jeree? I told you guys he was good, man. This guy, he's in DC. He's in the main office, making things happen. He can give you the big picture, and he can get down in the weeds if needed. But we asked him to keep it kind of big picture because folks are in different spaces in terms of their experience with these resources, with these agencies, and so we didn't want to just assume everybody knew everything. So we asked him to keep this kind of big picture for us. So again, he's just really one of the very best in the business around housing, particularly housing for underserved communities, local, state, and federal. He has that experience. So thank you, Jeree. Let's give him some love. You guys did a great job for us.
And I'll drop my information in the chat, so that way if you have any other questions, JR, or anyone else, you feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah. Okay. All right, you guys, let's shut it down for 10 minutes. We're going to come back right at 10 after 10, and we're going to hear from our colleague, Marin. You're going to love Dr. Marin Trotchman. She is amazing. She is, I can't call her my twin because her hair is longer than mine, but she is awesome, and you guys are going to really enjoy hearing from Dr. Trotchman. She's pretty special. All right. Let's take a pause for the cause, okay? 10 minutes. We'll be back at 10 after 10. Thanks. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Again, depending on where you're located, some people are in the midst of lunch, and some are craving lunch. So we know there's a time difference, and so we appreciate, again, everybody's flexibility. I'm super excited for our next speaker. She is something to behold. She telling you, Mar, I don't care what you say, Dr. Marin Trotchman, she is awesome. And she's my friend, and she is my colleague. And as I told you, by the end of Zoom, she's gonna be my family. So I appreciate it. So Dr. Trotchman, she's the Supervisory Housing Program Specialist. Let me say it again, Supervisory Housing Program Specialist in the Housing Voucher Management and Operations Division. The what? The Housing Voucher Management and Operations Division, where she oversees policies, funding announcements, and implementation for special purpose vouchers and housing mobility programs. She got a lot. There's a lot going on over there, and she's been doing this for over 10 years, over the past decade or so. She's my go-to, and I've said this, helping me learn and navigate HUD. Right, HUD is an $89 billion annual operation with a B, billion. So they have agencies and operations and programs. And so for me, who's been in higher ed for the last 35 years, me trying to figure out how to lead some of these conversations, it's taken me time, but also the relationship part. And Marin's been extremely helpful with helping me learn how some of this stuff works, who are the right people to be in conversation with. And so she's been a tremendous resource for me, as I mentioned, same with Jeree. They've been just great resources for this initiative. They deeply care about the work, they care about the people, and they care about the outcomes. So let me turn it over to Maren. We're in great hands with Dr. Trotchman, and we again applaud you for your time this morning, Maren. Thank you so much. Can't hear her.
All right, the host is
Okay,
unmuting me.
we got you now. Now we
All
got you.
right, thank you. As I'm sharing, it's for some reason my computer's very slow to think about what I'm asking it to do today. So thank you for that very kind introduction, Reggie, and for having me back to Campus Compact to kind of discuss a little bit about a special purpose voucher program that very clearly addresses this need of young people transitioning out of foster care for housing in order to further their own career and life goals, right? We know that stable housing, as Reggie has been talking about, stable housing is essential for them for anyone to really kind of pursue their life dreams and goals, and to be able to think about finals and exams and classes and tuition and all of the other things that young people and students have to think about, right? So I was brought into this work because I work on foster youth to independence, the FYI program, but I also want to talk a bit more about the larger housing choice voucher program, right? I know Jeree spoke about it a little bit. It sounds like most of you are fairly familiar with housing choice vouchers, HCVs. Please just stop me if I start talking in too many acronyms. But the reason I want to talk about HCVs is because it's the largest assisted federal resource, right, for housing subsidies, for affordable housing assistance. It serves about 2.6 million households. So this is something that I think is really essential to think about how we can ensure youth are tapped into this resource. Meanwhile, the FYI program, well, we love it. It's new, it's important, it's targeted to this population. It's only about 5,500 vouchers, right? So it's a drop in the bucket compared to this larger resource. So I want to talk really briefly and kind of high level about both of those things today. All right, let me advance my slide if I can here. My mouse appears to be lost. Give me a second here. All right, there we go. I'll drop my email in the chat as well for you all. But like I said, I want to talk about HCV in general and two sort of prohibitions or regulations that apply in general to most public housing agencies, right? MTW agencies, as Jeree spoke about, have some flexibility that most housing authorities do not have. I can't speak in detail about whether or not those flexibilities typically extend to these particular regulations, but just want to talk about those two things briefly and then give a brief overview of the FYI program, what it is, how you can see if it's available in your community or encourage partnerships within your community to bring these targeted vouchers and resources for foster youth in to serve these individuals. So this is probably not news to most of you, right? The HCV program essentially provides rental assistance to very low-income individuals and families. It is administered by public housing agencies that are either sometimes statewide, sometimes local, city or county, sometimes multiple county jurisdictions or regional jurisdictions. And participants get their voucher to rent housing in the private market. They have to find housing from private market landlords or property managers that meet specific requirements of the program, right? They have to be reasonable rent, they have to meet minimum health and safety standards, among other things. And typically participants will pay about 30% of their adjusted monthly income toward the unit, right? And so it allows them, if they're very low income, to pay a reasonable portion of their income towards rent and reserve the other parts of their income for other essentials. So one one question that we get a lot, that my team gets a lot, is related to what's called the student rule. So for housing choice vouchers, there is a general rule called the student rule that says essentially vouchers can't be provided to students unless they meet specific exceptions, right? And so some of these exceptions are outlined here. And I wanted to just highlight that for the most part, anytime you have a foster youth, a youth who's transitioning out of foster care, who has prior foster care experience, they do meet this exception in bold to the student rule, right? So they would typically be considered an independent student because they were in foster care, right? This last bullet B under there. So often we'll get questions like, oh, they can't go to school because they have FYI, they have this voucher. And it's like, well, do they meet these exceptions, right? So that's one important flag, that if you're working with young adults in your community, or somebody has a voucher, but they're like, I want to pursue higher ed, but I don't think I can because I have this other form of assistance, right? That's one thing I really wanted to underscore and point out. So again, this is another way that another exception is those classified as vulnerable youth, right? And most youth who are either runaway homeless youth or prior foster care experience meet these definitions and still qualify for housing choice voucher assistance. One big roadblock that I know Reggie and I have had long discussions about is, in general, the HCV program has specific types of housing that it deems ineligible, right? This is per our regulations, and college dormitories, campus housing, college dormitories are typically, they're listed as ineligible housing types, right? There are a lot of reasons for that. The rental structures are different, right? Sometimes they're not, they're a 9-month lease versus a 12-month housing assistance payment contract. There are lots of reasons for this, but this is regulatory, that in general, you cannot use your voucher in a dormitory. However, do want to point out that there are eligible, what HUD calls special housing types, right? That may be appealing to a population of former foster youth and young adults, right? One of those special housing types is shared housing. So, you know, a lot of times folks who are transitioning out of the foster care program, like going out and living on your own, isolated in your own house, your own apartment, feels like a lot, right? And you might want to have a roommate, or you might want to live in somebody's home and rent a room from them and have some shared space that you can use. That is eligible as long as the housing authority allows that per their own policies. And so we're working on putting out some resources around that, but just wanted to say, like, college dorms are a no-go. However, shared housing, other housing types are possible, right? And if you have, or you encounter situations where there are really special circumstances and you want guidance on, like, hey, what is the hard and fast rule per the regulation? Can we get some more details on what is or isn't allowed? We can definitely work with you on that. So I want to talk very briefly about why I'm here, the Foster Youth to Independence Program, FYI. So FYI was created back in 2019 because of the advocacy of former foster youth, people with lived experience going to Congress saying, hey, there's this huge need. 20,000, almost 20,000 young adults transition out of foster care every year. We know that they are more likely than folks who have not experienced foster care to experience homelessness by the time they're 26, right? We have this need. We need to target resources, make those resources available to these young people so that they never have to fall into and experience homelessness. So under FYI, HUD funds public housing agencies that have an active partnership with the Public Child Welfare Agency. And they can come in and request targeted vouchers, these targeted FYI vouchers, to serve eligible youth who have this history of child welfare involvement that are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. FYI is also unique and different from HCV because the rental assistance is time limited. So it's really designed by Congress, by these young adult advocates, to be sort of a limited assistance pathway towards self-sufficiency. So rental assistance is provided for 36 months or up to 60 months if the youth qualifies for an extension of their rental assistance. And I have some slides at the end. Julie or Reggie can share these out afterwards about what those extensions are if you want to get into the technical details of that. So there are also two ways that FYI is funded. So I know one of you mentioned NOFAs. The notices of funding opportunity, those like competitive funding applications where you submit a big application, it's scored blind, and then awards are announced maybe once a year. We have done that, but we also have this great mechanism for FYI that allows us to fund FYI on a rolling basis, non-competitively. And that means that any time and any housing authority with a voucher program, even if they don't currently have FYI, can form a partnership with the child welfare agency, come into HUD, say, hey, I have an active referral for this youth, they meet the eligibility criteria, they need housing, and request those vouchers. And so it's a much lower barrier to come in and request vouchers from us, and it allows us to fund housing authorities to serve these youth at any time that they're identified in their community. So that's one really cool aspect of FYI, and if you can take away one thing from this presentation, I hope you can take away like, hey, let me find out if my housing authority has this already, and if not, like how can I encourage these partnerships in my community and get this resource out there for young adults. I mentioned a little bit about the youth eligibility already, so I won't get too far into that. Just wanted to note that this is statutory. We at HUD don't have the ability to change this. This is what Congress wrote into the law of who can receive these vouchers, right? So in order to be referred and be determined eligible, a youth has to be between 18 and 24. Now, importantly, their assistance can continue beyond that for up to the time limit, right? So if they're referred at 24, they lease up at 24, they could get assistance beyond that age. This is just eligibility at initial referral and lease up. They have to have prior foster care experience. Another common misconception about FYI is that it's only for those youth who are currently under a transition plan. Those youth are eligible, but they don't have to be transitioning directly from foster care into an FYI voucher. Say they had foster care at some point when they were 15 or 16. They're no longer in touch with the child welfare system. They're still eligible, right? As long as their prior foster care experience can be verified, they can be determined to be eligible for this resource. They also have to be homeless or at risk of homelessness. And also wanted to note that often, maybe about 30% we estimate of young people with an FYI voucher are pregnant or parenting, right? That you're eligible, you don't have to be a single person household to get this resource. So a key aspect of FYI, and one reason I asked about Chafee funds earlier, so I'm in the housing policy space, right? And we use a lot of acronyms, and I am still learning the child welfare acronyms and lingo and funding streams, and state by state it varies. And so you will forgive me if I am asking very seemingly simple questions, right? I know how hard it is to kind of translate across policy domains because we try to do it all the time. And so this partnership agreement that is required for FYI is really intended to ensure that foster youth are supported, not just with housing, but with supportive services that they need to be successful, right? Whether that's housing navigation, whether that's referrals for things like education, right? And job readiness and job attainment training. And so the required partnership is between the housing authority and the local public child welfare agency, who often provides those supportive services by using their Chafee funds, But the Public Child Welfare Agency, we know Chafee funds, we know the federal funding to support transition-aged youth is very limited, right? And so the Child Welfare Agency can also secure supportive services, and that's really important, right? Because we want to make sure that no eligible youth is turned away just because child welfare says, hey, we don't have money right now to support the required supportive services. So with that, just want to underscore how essential this program can be a challenge, but we think it's really important, and partnerships are really, really key to making sure that FYI youth are successful in leasing up with their voucher, in maintaining and sustaining their housing, right? And one key partnership that we've seen really work in communities is where higher education institutions come in, community colleges, universities, right? Others who work with young adults all the time to be a part of that memorandum of understanding, or to say like, hey, local housing authority, like, do you have this resource? How can I ensure that if I see eligible youth, I can like refer them to the right person, get them in touch, get them connected to something that's going to help them have and maintain stable housing. So these are a list of the supportive services, but really just want to end by thanking you all. I think I have a little bit of time for questions. And then of course, like Julie or folks will definitely get these slides out to you and share resources with you. So with that, I'll hand it back to Reggie, or the moderator here.
Okay, this is great. So we got some time for questions, and I'm ready to jump through my screen. Okay, and hug Marin again. I'm ready to jump through my screen because she is such a great resource in this conversation. So for me, let me take a step back and just provide a little context, right? Colleges and universities, through our processes, financial aid, admissions, other programs that we have the ability to identify students that choose to make themselves identifiable, right? We know who's eligible in terms of who meets the program criteria: wards of the court, unaccompanied minors, homeless students, foster, former foster. We know who they are. We know what housing looks like, whether it's on-campus housing, off-campus housing, etc. Brian Spencer, who I think profusely spoke right before the break about students living on campus, off campus, all the different arrangements. And we know that today, as Marin mentioned, right, there's some language around no dormitories, but we know today, right, universities have all types of housing. And so we no longer even construct, right, the traditional model of the old dorms that I lived in 40 years ago. We have the apartment styles, many are owned by foundations, et cetera, et cetera. And so what Marin is pointing out is that Jeree shared earlier about a particular stream through moving to work. That's one agency, but she's talking about several other agencies that could be potential partners with colleges and universities for the same purpose around housing. And so what we haven't seen models around is that piece that Marin is just describing. And so, the work that many of these agencies have to do, identify clients, right? Determine if they're eligible, find an affordable place to live for their clients that will rent to these particular communities. All that work that the staff normally has to do, the universities have already done. We've already looked at the criteria for eligibility. We've already inspected our facilities. We know our dorms and apartments, et cetera, have running water, locking doors. We do leases. I don't think there's a university in America that doesn't provide leases. And the flexibility, 9 months, 12 months, depending on what the kid needs. We have international students that need 12 months. We have student athletes. I mean, we have all kinds of communities that we lease to. So a lot of those criteria that she's describing, we have in place already. But we don't have these partnerships. We've not worked with, we've not reached out to, et cetera. So let's take some questions. I'm just giving a little background, a little context. because she and I have had wonderful conversations over the last couple of years while I'm learning language and learning policies and practices. Let's take some questions from Martin, please.
I had one question, Marin. In some of the slides, is there going to be anything that we could provide? So in Florida, we do have a few universities that have pretty robust foster liaison programs. Is there something that'll kind of walk us through those regulations and that flexibility to help them understand it so we can kind of double team that housing authority?
Yes. So I think we have a couple of resources. There's a good fact sheet about like student aid and financial assistance resources in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. That comes up a lot. When you mentioned like the Florida specific voucher for foster youth, right? Really would love to get some of those exact cases in front of our legal counsel to see if we can like provide more detailed guidance for folks, because that question comes up a lot, right? With like ETVs, like how do we count it? What do we do? And our counsel is like, we can't provide sweeping guidance. Give us a clear example and context and we'll look at it and help with that. So we have some resources. We have some resources on the student rule. The HCV guidebook is probably the most accessible resource, and that's in my slides. But I think just generally, those sorts of resources, we just developed a flyer that's like young adult specific about FYI that I'll be sure to circulate via Reggie and team. So yeah, first of all, welcome your feedback on like what would be beneficial to those liaisons, like what type of guidance would be helpful, and then can also kind of wade through what we have out there and see if there's anything that would work in that context. Yeah.
That's fantastic, because I imagine it gets confusing for housing authority staff because ETV is federal, but Florida's a statewide program and called it an educational stipend. So it
Yes.
doesn't. So I imagine but that's not for now, but I appreciate it.
No, I think we did get that exact question, in fact, from like West Palm Beach Housing Authority or somebody in Florida. And we were like, ooh, like even we who do this policy work every day are not sure, like where's the source of funds and how is it used and how is it delivered? And all of those questions come into play. So happy to discuss further.
Fantastic. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts or questions, ideas, suggestions for Martin before we pivot to our next presentation? It's going to complement this. Yeah, please go on, Martin.
Yeah, I put my email. I have to jump off, but I put my email in the chat.
Yeah.
Please reach out to me. The other thing is, Reggie, I'll make sure to get over to you all. We are having a joint webinar with our colleagues in HHS, the Administration for Children and Families, to really just highlight how to do FYI effectively. And we're going to try and have 3 sort of like community partnerships highlight their experience and what's worked for them. So I'll get details over. Would love to have anyone who's interested join that, and please reach out with questions. Thank you.
I'll put that out for everybody as well. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, Martin. Thank you. Appreciate you. Let's give us some love, y'all. Give us some love. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate you. Okay. We're going to pivot and we're going to share what I think will be a complement to these conversations, a document that we just created recently that might lend itself as a resource for connecting folks in your state, in your region. And so you're going to meet my friend and colleague, Julie Chow. Julie works with Campus Compact, AmeriCorps. She's a Vista. She got a title. She's a Vista, and specifically for foster care youth housing initiative. This is what she's doing. So Julie brings over 20 years of experience in corporate America, leadership specifically. She's been in many, many leadership roles, and she has done a pivot to work with nonprofit for the first time in her illustrious career. So I want to welcome Julie. She is awesome. I talked to her probably more than anybody else. Julie this, Julie that. And she's the one who sent out the invitations for today. She's been working with Jasper to navigate all of this stuff behind the scenes to make this happen. So let's welcome Julie to the microphone. Julie, it's all you.
Great. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This has been a very, I'm absorbing things like a sponge. It's an exciting area where we can all contribute to providing housing security for former foster youth attending higher ed. Earlier, Jeree had presented a map with the moving to work public housing authorities that are affiliated with the moving to work program. Of the over 3,300 public housing authorities, around approximately 139 agencies are part of this housing innovation lab, if you will, that's called Moving to Work. And the team here at Campus Compact, including myself, we put together a spreadsheet which has all of the 139 agencies, their PHA public housing authority contacts and email, and as well as universities that are Campus Compact active members. We're adding all universities on here, but our first pass is Campus Compact affiliated universities, which number in the hundreds, and their distance to the public housing authority. So we wanted to kind of draw a circle of roughly a 30-mile radius. We've even included some that are beyond the 30-mile radius, hoping to do what I'm calling kind of a matchmaking, if you will. For instance, here in California, you have, UC Berkeley, which is 5.7 miles away from the Oakland Housing Authority. And the list, goes on. There's, lots of institutes of higher education listed here, and housing authorities. And so the thought and the goal, as Reggie is reiterated on several occasions, is we want to have the different parties begin to work, collaborate, and collectively, move the needle on tapping into the resources provided by HUD vis-a-vis public housing authorities, FYI voucher programs to support housing for foster youth in college. So this is kind of a high-level overview of the resources that Campus Compact is developing for our member organizations. So I think I'll leave it at that, and maybe there's questions or more operations.
So Julie, if you can scroll down. So all 139 moving to work agencies are listed here. Their emails, locations, distance to institutions. Again, the idea is to make it easy, or at least a starting point where folks can begin to connect with folks in their area, in their region. We're going to be adding more information to this as we go along. It's a living document. It's not something that's going to be stagnant. We're going to add more information. Specifically, we're going to be adding information around if the institution, if the university has a foster youth program, and if so, who that contact is at that particular campus. So again, the agency could reach out to the institution, or the institution could reach out to the agency. But we want to make it very easy to begin a conversation in the local region, in that state where these moving to work agencies exist. Any questions? Julie, how are we going to make this available to everybody?
Yeah, I'm trying to, I think we need to kind of think about that. I don't know if we just email it out or whether individuals have, because we do have, emails, but we are collecting other information on each of the other colleges. So I don't know if we want to give everything to everyone, or whether people reach out and then I provide.
I'm thinking we could make it easy and just email it to everyone that registered. Everyone that registered, we just send it to them. Okay. I think that was a question in the chat that we just saw.
I see.
Yeah, and we might want to because I have that toolkit. I don't think I'm going to talk about next. So maybe
Yeah.
if we email it to them, we could email the toolkit as well.
Perfect. So, well, here's this. Can we drop it in the toolkit?
Oh, we probably could. We'll
Let's
look at
do
that after.
Yeah.
Talk
So,
offline.
yeah.
The other, I do want to call out, it is a living document. So if yeah, so,
Yes.
so it's on a Google spreadsheet and I would have to give everybody permission to, I guess anyone with a link would have permission to look at it. But anyway, it's dynamic. And so I don't know if I need to make it static and share it with everyone or
Right.
whether people have access to the work in progress. So something.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But what we'll do is we'll put that document in this next document that we're going to share with you guys in just a moment, that we were planning to send out. So what we'll do is we will just put it all together so it comes as one. I think Julie, I think there was a comment in the that we just got. I couldn't read it in time.
Yeah, a non-Google version. That's a very good point, JR. Yeah, maybe I can drop it into, if we make it static, I can drop it into Word doc.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
I have that issue with Google all the time. I share the wrong one and then yeah.
Okay.
People can't access it because they don't have Google accounts. It gets
Yeah.
messy. So that's
Okay.
why.
And you get charged 25 cents for every person. So yeah.
Oh goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So but we think we think it'll be useful. And we're going to continue to work on the document, adding more information to it down the road, but it's a great start. Nothing like this existed prior to us putting it together. It just did not exist, but we think it would be useful for everybody. And so we want to continue to work on it, add to it, and share it as we continue to develop it. With that in mind, I am pleased to introduce my cohort in crime, my co-host, my sister from another mister. She is my dear friend, Cheryl Borgstrom. She brings over 20 years of experience. She is my liaison. So let me give this the right context. When I first started working with HUD in their think tank, I asked for a liaison, somebody that could help me learn to navigate the organization. And over some time, HUD reached out and identified her as the liaison, our partner, our trusted resource to help navigate this very, very large agency. They said Cheryl Borgstrom. She brings over 20 years of experience in public affordable housing for the federal government. She's worked in Utah, Washington, and Nevada. Affordable housing. She was an on-site manager, compliance specialist, contract management services, project manager for multifamily, public and Indian housing as a program analyst. And currently, she is with field policy and management as a program analyst. She does it all. Cheryl does it all. And I am so pleased and honored to introduce my friend and colleague who's going to talk about this particular resource that we want to share with you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Reggie. It's always a pleasure working with you. And it's kind of hard too, because he's the entertainment and everyone loves him. And then I come up there and I'm pretty boring. So I guess we complement each other. But yeah, I just want to quickly go over the toolkit that we created together. And this is just, we kind of already talked about a lot of it, so we're not going to really do a deep dive into it throughout this meeting. But it gives you ideas of like how to begin this partnership with your housing authority and with the university. And it kind of just a great example is Reggie and I. Reggie just reaching out. And then when I got involved, I just started reaching out to other PHAs that I knew and just like starting those virtual meetings, because a lot of people like to meet virtually. It's easier. And so we set a lot of calls up virtually through these platforms. Just to get the conversation started. What are you doing? You know, how can we help? Because as you talk to other public housing authorities, they are already helping foster youth and they might not see that they need to do more. And so, but then as you talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, you know, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. So, you know, it's just it's first important to just really reach out to everyone and see what they already are doing. And so that's what the first page talks about. It's just creating that partnership, finding out who that PHA is in your local area, depending on who you are, or the university, which is great with what Julie created. And then, you know, creating that virtual retreat, the virtual webinar. And we gave you ideas of what to think about when you create it. And then I just wanted to quickly go over like all the links, because JR was mentioning, you know, having some material on FYIs. So here, if you go to 4 on the toolkit under resources, there is a YouTube channel that the Las Vegas office does. We do HUD Talks monthly. And here we actually did a virtual retreat that we recorded, Reggie and I and Marin and Jury and the Housing Authority. That's local to Nevada. But you'll learn a lot through those webinars, and they are long. They're like 2 hours long each. So, you know, like maybe as you're like soaking in the tub, in a bubble bath, whatever, as you're running, put it on your headphones. Or when you're crocheting or whatever your hobby is, hopefully you can find time to listen to it. It might seem a little daunting when you see the 2 hours or 3 hours on it, but it's really good tool. And just learning like, what is the PHA thinking and what were some of their questions? Because you'll hear it all on this webinar. But what you do is they're live links. So you just do the control, the CTRL tab that's on your computer. You will push that and click on your mouse. And then when you click on it, what will happen is it'll come to this link, and I'll just show you that quickly. I think you can see it. Here's our YouTube channel. So you can actually view all of our HUD Talks that we've done in Nevada, and it's just talking about all the agencies that are within HUD. And here you'll see Reggie for the virtual retreat day 1 and day 2. And then we did another one where you'll see Bobby, and we did another initiative as well. So these are all great tools to help you. And when we go back to that document, if you find that YouTube channel to be too daunting, then you can just go to the actual retreat. So you just do that again, the control click, and you can listen to day 1 and day 2. And when you do that, it will look like this. You'll see Reggie, great little first picture of him. And that's for retreat 1. And then for retreat 2, when you clicked on it, again, there's Reggie starting it. It's 2 hours and 33 minutes. So again, I really encourage you to listen to it. You'll learn a lot through it. And I still go back and listen to it because there was a lot that was discussed in there. And you'll also, if you listen to the day 2 one, I think that's where you'll hear Southern Nevada Housing Authority, and you'll hear like some of the things they do for their foster youth, which is different from, you know, doing the part that Reggie and San Diego Housing Commission did. And they're also not a move to work agency. So it's and it's nice to hear their perspective, because later on you'll hear Brenda and Jamie, who's from Reno Housing Authority, who is a move to work designated agency, talking as well. So you actually get the two difference, the one that is and one that isn't. So that one's a really good one to listen to. And then the other link is the move to work. So I'll go back to that document right here. So we have the moving to work document where we took some of what Jeree discussed and made it quicker to get access to. So hopefully it's everything that you feel was important to have. I highlighted this one, just the moving to work page, because that goes directly to the map right here. If you scroll down, so you'll see the move to work. You can read about it, what the purpose is, the FAQs. And then down here at the bottom is where you can find that map that he was showing us. So that's great. You can just click on this. And when you click on it, you can actually see the list of all the move to work agencies. And I can't figure out, like, it doesn't look like it's in alphabetical order or date order. So you just have to kind of scroll and find it to see, like, oh, you know, where's Nevada? And you just scroll, and then you can see like when they started as a move to work and what their focus is. So that was a really great tool. We made sure that was in the toolkit. And then same with HUD Exchange is another good one that you can learn more. Again, this is HUD Exchange. You got to create your account. There's a lot of information, not just on moving to work, but FYI. So again, that's a great tool there as well. And then we also have a list of the move to work agencies and their contact list, which is on that that jury has on that HUD.gov webpage. But what Julie's working on is more personalized, which will be really great. So I'm excited for what they are doing with that. And then I think my time's up. So also later on in the toolkit, you'll see the FYI vouchers and all the information that someone was asking about that. So you can find all that information here. And again, that is under the toolkit where it says foster youth to independence. So you'll see a lot of information on foster youth, information on campus compact. And then again, just to end it is on my part is if you do have specific questions, I would say when you're like forming that partnership, you're going to have a lot of generic questions, like maybe reach out to Reggie and I. You just, Marin and Jeree said they're willing to have you reach out to them. But once you start getting it going, there is a specific email that you can email your questions to, which is right here, Move to Work, and also for the Foster Youth to Independence email. And then there's my email. So, feel free to reach out to Reggie and I. We're willing to help get it started. Maybe we do a virtual retreat, help you get that started in that state that you're interested in. And that's all I have, Reggie, unless you guys want me to share more.
Yeah. And so as we mentioned, the map that Julie was just talking about previously, we're going to add that to this document. So there'll be a link to that as well. So you can have everything in one location. Again, this is something we created because there were so many different conversations and resources, and we wanted to put it in one place and make it easy for folks to connect to. Let's take some questions. We got just a few more minutes. Any questions about anything that you've heard so far for the last hour 45 minutes or so? Julie, I'm gonna rely on you to see if we got any in the chat.
Let me take a look. I think it's will this toolkit be shared with us? Yes, it will be. We will email it right to every registrant of today's meeting.
Yeah. Any other questions, last thoughts?
Has the sample MOU been has the sample MOU been helpful for the organization? JR, maybe I can have you speak directly.
I just know, and what you were sharing, like on the HUD website, they've got a sample memorandum of understanding. And I know I'm finding some of those resources now, but every organization so far has been reinventing the wheel every single time. And I just didn't know if you've had people use that template and gotten feedback that it was super helpful and kind of sped up the process.
I haven't got feedback on that, but I do know, like with other MOUs that I've been a part of, like typically they'll ask me, or I'm pretty close with Reno Housing Authority and Southern Nevada Housing Authority, and a lot of times instead of them reinventing the wheel, I'll be like, "Can I share your MOU with them?" And then we'll go back and forth because why recreate the wheel? Just change some of the wording in it. So if there was someone wanted that, I could provide a sample if needed.
Yeah, and that's the very reason that we're creating this toolkit from scratch to make it much easier on folks so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's our whole purpose. Any other questions? I'm going to wrap this up if we don't. Okay, so I'm sorry. What was the last one, Julie? I couldn't catch it.
It says, thank you, Taylor. Just an expression of appreciation and support for everybody's work today. What a wonderful way to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let me say this. I'm not sure if how many folks got a chance to log in a few minutes early. We were going to try to have a little music playing, and I was very specific about 2 songs in particular, and I'm not sure if we got to them or not, or if you got a chance to listen to them or not. But one of them that I wanted to hear this morning was by Kirk Franklin. It's called "I Smile." Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. But there's a line in that song in particular I wanted to reference. It says, "Now every day ain't gonna be perfect, but it still don't mean that today don't have purpose. Said again, now every day ain't gonna be perfect, but it still don't mean that every day don't have purpose. Even though I've been here for a while, I smile. And I was thinking about that because sometimes in this work that we do, things may not be moving as fast as we may want. That's something that I've been experiencing because, again, I come from higher ed, and I thought that was a little slow. But we move things along. Working with HUD and the federal government, geez, oh, peas, things move a little bit slower than I'm used to. But I'm reminded, again, every day is not going to be perfect, but it doesn't mean that today doesn't have purpose. And so I hope she don't mind me sharing this story. I can't help but share this story about Cheryl. We were having a meeting with some colleagues from around the country a few months ago. And Cheryl and I were going to host this conversation. And she said, okay, I'm trying to get my Zoom on. And I was trying to figure out what's taking us so long. And when she got on the Zoom, on the picture, she had on a coat and a hat and gloves. And she was talking. I'm like, Cheryl, where are you? And she said, oh, today we're doing our counting. And I'm like, counting for what? She says, we're counting all of the homeless in our city. And so we go out personally at 4 a.m. and we start counting and checking on them to see what services they need. And I'm like, wait a minute, you've been counting homeless people since 4 this morning in the winter cold, and you didn't want to miss our Zoom meeting this morning? So you're doing both at the same time? She's like, yeah. I was humbled and I almost started crying because I'm thinking, sitting in my little Zoom office in my house, in my heater, and thinking it's kind of early in the morning, and she's been out since 4 o'clock. So let me just say this. And when I preface this early, that you're never going to hear me complaining about the work, the people, or even the pace. Though I'm not used to the pace and I'm adjusting to the pace, it's because I have deep appreciation, deep honor for all of you, everyone on this screen and many who are not, who do the work every day. That makes a difference. The other song that I wanted to play this morning was by the Beatles. In 1967, they released a song called With a Little Help from My Friends. Some of you weren't born in 1967, but there's a few of us that was around then. I wasn't old enough to dance to the music yet, but I was there. So again, it's called With a Little Help from Friends, from my friends. And what I'm saying is that I can't do this work. We can't do this work without a little help from our friends. And all of you are my friends and colleagues. And now you're a little bit of my family too now. And that's my theme. With a little help from my friends, we can do anything. We can do this work. We can implement changes, expand what we do. We can do this work. I appreciate you. I thank you for the pleasure of your time this morning and this afternoon. And let us know if we can help you guys, okay? And so we will, again, email all this out to you, all the contacts, all the information that we've shared. We want to make this available to you at a price that you can all afford. No cost at all, zero. That's what it costs to do this work with us, is zero. Have a good rest of your day, okay? We appreciate you all.